A ceasefire has finally been reached between Gaza and Israel after the worst fighting seen since November last year. Violence spiraled over the weekend after Israel and Islamic Jihad traded fire, killing 4, including 2 protesters on Friday. Over the next 2 days, hundreds of rockets were launched into Israel from Gaza, killing 4 Israelis. IDF pounded the besieged enclave in response with airstrikes and artillery, killing 25 Palestinians, including 2 pregnant women and a 14-month-old baby girl. Now, ceasefire was announced on the first day of the holy month of Ramzan, while there are bomb shelters and the Iron Dome protecting the Israelis from attacks. The residents of Gaza are in a congested, tight space, overcrowded, and with 0 shelters to protect them at times of intense aerial firing and military fire. So what is the future of the Gaza Strip, as well as pontificating over what trend is it going to take now that Netanyahu is back in the office? What is the plight going to be of these Gazan people? So I'd like to welcome my guests here. We have with us Mr. CJ Worleyman. He's an analyst. And also we have Mr. Muslim Imran, an analyst joining us from Kuala Lumpur. Welcome to both of you to Newswire. Let me start with you, Mr. Muslim Imran. Now that there is a ceasefire in effect since early morning, the Islamic Jihad is saying in various reports that Israel has agreed to some of its stipulations, one of which include easing the blockade on Gaza. What can you tell us about this agreement?
Well, the Palestinian resistance has expressed its interest in a longer ceasefire, not one that would last 4 days and then Israel would breach it. But Israel is not serious about these ceasefires. Israel wants to have a free hand in Gaza to bombard whenever it wants, to kill civilian protesters mainly, whenever it wants, without Palestinian response. That's why even if they reach a ceasefire agreement now, there are no guarantees that Israel won't breach it again. The Palestinian resistance leaders are currently in Cairo. They were there before the start of the latest Israeli escalation, and that shows that the Palestinian resistance leadership is serious about reaching some sort of a ceasefire deal with the other side. But Israel isn't serious about it. Israel, in fact, is talking about ceasefire now only because it has its Nakba or Independence Day celebrations in a week time, and the international contest Eurovision on the 14th of May. Therefore, the Israeli leadership isn't interested in an international embarrassment. They are talking about a ceasefire now. I don't think they are serious about holding the ceasefire for so long. They have committed heinous war crimes in the latest escalation. Mm-hmm. They killed many innocent children, pregnant mothers, and others, and that's why, as a Palestinian, I don't think Israel will.
It's going to hold on to its end of the deal. Let me ask you then, Mr. Solomon, what is your take on this? There seems to be a pattern here in Gaza that there are escalations and there's a lull when a ceasefire or a deal is struck, and then that too very quickly is broken off. Do you agree with Mr. Muslim here that Israel, as always, will not hold on to its end of the bargain?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Israel hasn't held on to its end of the bargain forever. I mean, to be honest, Israel has been shooting and killing Palestinian protesters, unarmed Palestinian protesters, including women, children, journalists, medics, every single day for the last 12 months. It was only after another 24 Palestinian protesters were shot on Thursday and Friday that militants from Islamic Jihad, snipers, fired at Israeli snipers, fired at the very same snipers that have been shooting unarmed Palestinian protesters for the last year. Then the rocket fire came from Israel's side. Israel carried out a drone strike on Hamas militants in Gaza. And from there, Hamas militants and Islamic Jihad fired rockets in retaliation to Israel. Now, that context has been lost, and that timeline has been lost when American politicians and the Israel lobby and also media portray what is happening in Gaza at the moment. So, no, I don't have any hope that a ceasefire would be held. Israel doesn't do that. Israel has moved its artillery, it's moved its tanks, and moved infantry divisions closer to the Israeli security perimeter, ready for another ground invasion, which I think is, more likely than the next coming month.
That's true. Let me show you what the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, said earlier.
אני הנחיתי הבוקר את צה"ל להמשיך בתקיפות המסיביות נגד גורמי הטרור ברצועת עזה, וכן הנחיתי לעבות את הכוחות סביב רצועת עזה בכוחות שריון, ארטילריה וחי"ר.
A lot of analysts, Mr. Muslim, are commenting on this escalation having been as bad as what led to the war in 2014.
If he carries out a big-scale invasion or attack on Gaza, he would not face international, legal consequences. The Goldstone report, which we all remember, basically attributed many of the war crimes that occurred in the 2008-2009 war to the Israeli military forces, but no international action has been taken. That's why Israel followed suit in 2012 and again in 2014 and committed preposterous war crimes in Gaza. This time around, Netanyahu thinks that if he has to carry out a similar attack on Gaza, then he would do so. He is currently forming a government with the worst of ultra-nationalist right-wing groups in Israel's history. So in order to appease and to please these coalition partners, he will certainly commit more war crimes, and he will certainly try to show that he's strict with the Palestinians. But it never worked. All these Israeli
No, there's something, Mr. Wollerman, that Mr. Muslim said here, that Israel will never be held accountable for its actions. And why would it, when one of the superpowers of the world, the US, continues to support him? And again, at this moment, when this conflict was escalating, President Trump came out with a tweet supporting Israel's actions, saying it was their right to defend themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just President Trump, and it's not just the Republican Party that he represents. Support for Israel's war crimes in Gaza enjoys bipartisan support in the United States. We saw today, in the last 24 hours, politicians, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, including a number of high-profile Democratic Party senators and congressmen, echo the same sort of propaganda and nonsense put the Israel lobby, almost mirroring the AIPAC's tweet word for word, and therefore confusing Americans about what's really happening, and which enables when the American public is not clued into what's really happening there in Gaza, then America has the political will or the political power to prevent any further investigation or any further action against Israel, whether that be sanctions or whether the condemnation within the UN.
Right. And Mr. Muslim, let me read what Trump said. To the Gazan people, these terrorist acts against Israel will bring you nothing but more misery. End the violence and work towards peace. It can happen. What do you make of his tweet, considering the 12-year blockade has completely ruined the economy of Gaza, this tiny strip of land where 2 million people are congested in what foreign leaders have openly said is an open-air prison?
Trump's statements show his utter ignorance of what's happening in Gaza. He's trying to please the Israel lobby in the U.S. Without any regard to international law, to international humanitarian law, or the situation per se. His foreign secretary has also made similar ridiculous statements, which show that they are unaware of what's going on the ground. Israel has been besieging Gaza for 13 years. The Palestinians have not been besieging themselves in Gaza. Israel has been besieging the Gaza Strip for 13 years, denying basic necessities, basic amenities. Water is being denied from entering Gaza. Israel is robbing Palestinian underground water. Electricity supply is very low. At best, it can reach 4 hours a day because Israel has continuously bombarded the power plants in Gaza. It's one of the biggest open-air prisons in the world. So the U.S. stand is very biased, and we're not looking up to the U.S. for solutions in this context. I would say our hopes are on the rest of the international community, on the OIC member states. They have to take a stand so far, very few Arab and Muslim nations have even made statements about what's going on in Gaza. I understand that there is a huge international pressure on them, but that's not a justification. The Palestinians in Gaza are sacrificing everything they have. And the minimum that they expect from their fellow brothers and sisters all over the world is to stand by their struggle.
One of the statements that came out from the IDF was, with a video that was released, that a car that was targeted by a drone and the driver killed was actually a person who was in charge of transferring money from Iranian sources to Hamas and Islamic Jihad, that the IDF released this, saying that he was Hamid Ahmed Khudari, along with many other videos released in the past few days claiming who they attacked. What do you make of this statement by the IDF?
Well, the 14-month-old child was not transferring any money to anybody. The two pregnant women who were bombarded, the 4 families who were wiped out, were not transferring any money to anybody. And it does make no sense that the Palestinians are being targeted for helping their own self-defense. Israel receives an annual American military aid of $4 billion. In the same logic, Palestinians have the right, the Palestinian resistance in Gaza has the right to bombard whoever transfers that money to the Israeli banks and to the Israeli war machines. It is ridiculous. Israel continues to commit war crimes and brings all these pretexts to cover its war crimes. The hundreds of Palestinians who were murdered in the Great Return marches were not transferring any money. They were not carrying any weapons.
And it's also interesting, Mr. Muslim, how when this video surfaced of the drone strike on this car, it was very precise, it was very accurate. The periphery damage was not as much. And at the same time, they don't have an explanation for how they mistakenly attacked these families where pregnant women were sitting with children in their laps.
Israeli army has some of the most sophisticated state-of-the-art weaponry. They use it against civilians. This has been documented by all kinds of international organizations. It was documented on several occasions by Israeli human rights groups themselves. Everyone in the world knows that Israel is a war criminal regime, but it's a matter of willingness on behalf of the international community to take action. Everyone knows that Israeli leadership is representing a Nazi-like political ideology, but no one takes action against their authorities because of the cover they receive from the superpower. Right. So the Palestinians are basically defending their basic rights of living and existence. There are no problems in people defending themselves. It's enshrined in international conventions. The problem is in occupation. When Israel wants to perpetuate its occupation, it commits more war crimes in order to maintain its system of occupation. That will never continue for so long.
Right. So, Mr. Waliman, there's also this side of the debate where it is believed by some analysts that Hamas and Israel actually need each other. They're codependent on each other for their own sort of incentives of why they dominate the region. Do you agree with that analysis?
The analysis is, especially when you can consider the fact that Hamas is the love child was birthed by the Israeli or the Israeli intelligence. Israel helped foment and extreme Islamic groups to offset the influence, the strength of the Palestinian Liberation Organization in the 1970s, 1980s. Were not for Israel, Hamas wouldn't exist. Hamas used Israel a fig leaf to carry out repressive and brutal security policies against the Palestinian people. Okay. So, yeah, absolutely agree with that analysis.
Right. So, Mr. Muslim, what do you agree with this, what Mr. Waliman just said?
I certainly don't agree with any kind of formula that equates between the occupation and the occupied. The Israeli government, the Israeli regime is sponsored by the superpower to continue an occupation not only in Palestine but also in the Golan Heights and in some parts of southern Lebanon. The Palestinians, the Syrians and Lebanese are defending their own basic rights it makes no sense to equate between the two of them. Yes, Israel receives a response from the Palestinian resistance groups whenever it bombards Gaza, but that does not mean that the projectiles that the Palestinians fire from Gaza are equivalent to the war machine that Israel uses. The F-16s, the Apaches, the very sophisticated state-of-the-art Israeli weaponry, which kill hundreds of Palestinians on few days.
But would you agree to the point? Would you agree to the point that in itself, the Palestinian Authority, the political factions in itself, have so many differences that it creates a perfect opportunity for Israelis to take advantage of that?
We have a very dysfunctional Palestinian political system, and that's a different story. Yes, the Palestinian political system is a failed system. It needs reform, but I won't blame one side or another. The system has been divided because of external pressure, because of Israeli and American pressure on the system. Okay. We all remember that Israel continues to rob the Palestinian Authority of its tax money. The Americans rejected the results of the 2006 parliamentary elections. So the current Palestinian division is an engineered division which is created by the external powers, not by the Palestinians themselves.
Okay, the Palestinians Mr. Muslim, I'm sorry, we'll have to right there. We've run out of time. But thank you so much for your insight and your valuable opinion. Also, thank you to Mr. CJ Wollerman for taking part here on Newswire. And with this, we've come to the end of the show. We will see you tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.